Hi, I'm Dr. Shammick Kotecha from the Kotecha GPS Club. I'm discussing today some things with Paul Martin from Wilton Martin Litigators in Toronto. Welcome. Thank you for joining us again. It's been about a month since you and I chatted about some things.
Yeah, another month and still no haircut.
Yes. My wife says she doesn't like the stubble, so I've been shaving. So we're going to talk about a couple different things today. We're going to talk about an update on the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy, maybe some updates on the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, and maybe get into some associate dentist issues. But before we go any further, I'm going to say what I always say. It's our disclosure. This is just for discussion purposes only. And if you truly need advice, please contact your own advisors and your own lawyers. Okay. So Paul, how you been? Life is good? Busy?
Busy, very busy over the last little while. The majority of what we've been assisting our clients with over the last, I'll say, month is advice on these various government programs and the interplay between the programs and how we can best set it up for our clients so that they're maximizing their access to these benefits and also assisting their staff members as best they can. So fortunately, these programs exist. Probably, unfortunately, they're not as straightforward as they could be. And so we spend a significant amount of time working with our clients, again, just assisting them to get through all of this. And to my mind, there continues to be some uncertainty in the marketplace about how these programs work. And so that, people will go and they'll read something on the internet and they'll get confused. And there's a lot of questions about, how you can best access these programs and best use them so that you're not out of pocket a lot of money. But with that comes a lot of questions.
Yeah, I agree. So let's start with the Canadian Emergency Wage Subsidy. I'm going to start with myself. As of April 27th, I think you were allowed to apply. I applied very early in the morning. I did not have a My Business account. So a couple days before I had set it up. They do require you to have a PIN sent to you by mail, which takes 10 days. I did find that if you don't have a My Business account and you set one up, just call Service Canada business support line as soon as you can, because you are sometimes able to get it over the phone, which I was, because they were able to verify who I was. I did not realize that all you need is one business account and you can do all your companies under it. So I have 3 companies and all 3 were easily accessible once I started it. So I set it up. The questions I've been having, I applied through using the Excel worksheet that they had provided, and I think they've updated it a few times. In terms of dental clients, did you have clients have issues? And what were those issues?
I've had no clients have any practical issues in terms of accessing the portal and filling out the information required so that they can apply for the benefit. So that aspect of it, once you figure out what it is you want to do, seems to be relatively seamless.
Yeah, I'd agree. Do you know, did you have any clients get any notice that they've been denied, or I was denied, or any request for any more information at all?
No, not yet.
Yeah.
That could be coming down the pipe at some point once they start reviewing the applications. But so far, so good.
I had a phone call from CRA about 3 or 4 days ago to verify just my information. And it was only on one of my accounts. It wasn't on all of them.
Okay. And who knows? I mean, maybe they're just picking people off at random to ask these questions, because I can't imagine that they have the workforce power to call every single applicant.
No.
I don't think so.
She said to me they were working from homes using encrypted cell phones trying to get a hold of clients. And I didn't take her call at first because it was a number I didn't know. So she left a message and then I called her back. So May 7th was supposed to be when we were supposed to start receiving payments if you applied for the first period, which I did. I have not received any payments. I check my bank accounts daily just to see if it has. Do you have any clients that you know have said they've got any payments, or have you heard anything? Because I mean, May 7th has come and gone, and
yeah, I haven't had anyone say that they've been paid, but nor have I had people calling me complaining that they haven't been paid. I expect that the payments were supposed to start flowing on May 7th, and they likely did, but it's likely that people have been placed in a queue.
yeah,
So you'll get yours. It's not that everyone was automatically going to get their money on May 7th, and that was always my understanding of it. So there could be some lag time, but you know, the lag time's not all that significant, which was one of my initial concerns when they started rolling out this program. The great mystery was when the payments were going to start flowing back to employers. Once they announced it was May 7th, I think that put a lot of people at ease.
yeah.
Because you might not get it exactly on May 7th, but if you apply, it looks like you'll get it in a week to 10 days after you apply.
The one thing to note is I mean, I'm sure you've told all your clients this, is make sure they have direct deposit, because if they don't, it's going to definitely take a lot longer.
Right.
It'll take 10 working days, which can take some time.
Check it in the mail, as they say.
Yes, exactly. And, it's not like mail. I mean, the post office is busy enough as it is. So I think that's a tough thing for them. So the first period is over. A lot of dentists, or colleagues of mine, a lot of us have been waiting for the first payment because we want to see how quickly the payments are, whether we're going to put other staff members back on payroll, because I personally had one staff member each on payroll during that, since we were shut down. I left one person on each payroll, and then of course myself on one of my company. So I think a lot of people are waiting for that to see if have your client, is that similar to what some of your clients have been doing, or have they been putting?
Yeah, a lot of clients are still in a wait and see approach.
Yeah,
just because, and again, from an administrative perspective, there is some work that goes into this and figuring out how you want to pay, what you want to pay, who you want to pay. And so a lot of clients now are just, they're getting their ducks in a row to figure this out. But one of the major changes that occurred, I think, since the last time we spoke, was that the government announced that most of this can be done, or all of it can be done retroactively. So that helps put people at ease in terms of getting this done, because a lot of people are saying, you know what, I'll figure it out and I'll get it done at some point in May. And there's no big mad rush to get it done by a certain date so that you don't qualify. So I find that a lot of clients are making sure that they fully understand the programs, that they're looking at their own finances and figuring out exactly what it is that they can do in terms of floating money during this period of time, and then jump into this over the next week or two.
Yeah, I would say that's similar to what I've heard. I mean, even myself and some of my friends, they're dentists, we don't, a lot of us most of my friends had no staff on at all left, except for pretty much them and their other people, their families that they may have had on payroll. So let's discuss some questions on some things that I've seen online, and some questions I've had asked to me and I didn't know the answer. So I'm just going to ask. External advisors, like if for example, accountants and lawyers, if I have one of them as my external advisor that's on my CRA approved list in my mind, can they apply for me, or do I have to apply myself?
Absolutely. I think if you have them as your authorized representative with the CRA, then there's no problem. In fact, I'm a firm believer in do as I say, not as I do. I have my own external advisor looking into the portal for us, simply because I don't have the time right now to focus in to get it done. So I've been actually working with our accountant to fill it out for us. So if I do it, it should be fine.
Yeah, that's fine. Now, there's one question I saw and I've been asked, and I thought the answer was you couldn't do this, but I've had other people give other opinions. Rehiring and backdating employees. I was under the understanding that was a no, but what is your thought on that?
It's a yes. It is one of those things. So there's been a couple of things since I think we last spoke that have changed with these programs. And they sort of changed on the fly. Okay. So it was just overnight on, I think it was the weekend before April 27th. There was a change that said you can now do all of this retroactively. So if you really wanted to, you could backdate all of these payments back to the first day of layoff.
Yeah.
And get credit for them right through the whole CEWS period. If you do that retroactively,
Sure.
you need to keep in mind that your employees who are receiving CERB or at the outset EI, they're all on CERB now, will have a repayment obligation in certain circumstances. So what I've been telling my clients is to communicate with your people, communicate with your staff members to figure out what it is they want to do. Of course, you know, if you're paying them $847, which is the max under CEWS, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer that you would take that retroactively and pay back the $500 that you otherwise receive, because that's $347 in the pocket of the staff member. But surprisingly, a lot of people are just saying, I don't want to go through that headache. I don't want to go through the headache of paying money back. And so just start me on the next period, or at least just start me on the April 12th period. So I'm finding that a lot of clients of mine, even though they can, are not going all the way back to March. Most of them are starting either the April 12th period or they're waiting again for this May 10th period.
Yeah, that's what I've had conversation. I didn't realize you could backdate. I think, you know, with anything government related, in terms of paying back and getting money and crediting, I think we're all waiting. I mean, that's the thing, you know, I haven't seen that's, you know, I just asked you if you knew clients have been paid. No one's really said anything. I mean, they said, I want to see some dental clients, friends of mine who would say, oh, you know, listen, I have got payment from the government before I consider putting more employees back on there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that wait and see approach is the one being employed by a lot of employers.
Yeah. Just remind me, when are they going to end the wage employment? Have they said it's still September, or have they picked an end date?
Well, no. So the wage subsidy program itself ends on June 6th. Yeah. But in terms of applying, and actually receiving the credit, the subsidy itself, the portal will remain open to make the application until I believe it's the end of September.
Okay, well that makes sense. I mean, it comes down to a cash flow thing. Eventually, we're going to have to get back to work, hopefully sooner than later. Any other issues that you've come across with the wage subsidy program at all?
So yes, the largest one that I've come across over the last little while that's causing the most confusion in the marketplace is that the CERB program was amended at one point over the last month, whereby employees were entitled to earn $1,000 per CERB period and still maintain the $2,000 CERB benefit. Okay, and so what this has done is created a situation where, and I'll give you an example. Perfect. Let's say that you have an employee who's earning pre-COVID $600. Yep. Okay, and you still can't afford to pay that 25% on top of that. Okay, so you only want to pay the 75% so that you get a full reimbursement from the government at 100%, which is the way that program works. And I will reiterate this at this point. There still seems to be some confusion about having to contribute the 25%. And I want to get to that in a moment as well. So just keep that in mind. Let's right now work forward on the assumption that you'll only pay the 75%. Okay. And so you have a staff member who will earn $600. 75% of that is $400. Yeah. And so if you were to call that person back on the CEWS program, they would have a repayment obligation of the CERB. So you'd actually be hurting that employee by making it so that they lose $100 per week because they're better off staying on the CERB and getting the $100. So what, again, the CERB program does say is that you can earn up to $250 per week and still maintain the $500 weekly CERB benefit. And so
you said $250, right?
$250 a week, $1,000 over the CERB 4-week period. But let's just use weeks because it's cleaner and easier. Yeah. So again, you have someone who at 75% would be $400. You don't want to pay, and they certainly don't want to just receive $400. They'll say to the employer, I'm not agreeing to go back on CEWS because you're going to make it so I lose $100 per week. So with this new allowance of $250 per week, without impacting the CERB benefit, employers could actually pay $250 or less the top staff members up to get them up over 500 to get something closer to what they were earning pre-COVID. And so, you know, in a quick and dirty example, if you had someone who was exactly at 500, that's 75%. You could put 250 into their pocket through CEWS,
and you'll be reimbursed.
They would get 750 overall for that week. By keeping their CERB, and the employer would get subsidized for the $250 through the CEWS.
It's interesting.
Okay?
You know,
it is very interesting. Now, the confusion stems from, I think it was 2 Mondays ago. First off, our Prime Minister, in one of his daily speeches, said you can't get both. Okay, and so right away people got scared that this, $250 allowance wouldn't be reimbursed through CEWS, or conversely, they'd lose CERB.
Mm-hmm.
But what he didn't say in that speech was this very narrow carve out of earning the 250. And I can tell you that that has been legislated. Okay, so it's not like it's a loophole or something like that that people have come up with. That is out there. That's in the regulations with respect to these programs. So I see nothing inherently wrong with it, but a lot of employers are skittish in terms of doing it because it's almost like they feel the employees are getting something for nothing. And if you want to take a really gross example, let's say that you had an employee who was only earning $250 pre-COVID because they're a part-time employee. Yeah. You could theoretically, and now they're on CERB at 500. You could theoretically give them the $250, and all of a sudden they have a $750 pay per week. So they've gone up by $500. So, in certain circumstances, that might be problematic, and that might be an example of gaming the system. But overall, I see nothing wrong with it if you run the numbers honestly and correctly. So again, with these employees who basically might have $600 or $650 of pre-COVID earnings, you can allow them to keep their CERB benefit. And pay them $250 or less, and they get to keep that, and then you're subsidized for the CEWS as well.
So it's a good way to bring back some staff some of the time.
That's right, and it's a creative way to do it.
I have a question.
Certainly, and one more point there. What I'm starting to find is more and more clients are now asking staff members to come in and do a day of work. Okay, admin work, whatever it may be. And certainly in those cases, there would be absolutely nothing wrong with you paying them for an honest day's work. Okay, so if you call an employee in for an honest day's work, and let's say that employee earns $25 an hour, you want to call them in for 10-ish hours of work a week. There should be nothing wrong with you paying them for the actual work that they're providing and allowing them to keep the CERB on the side. That's exactly how this is designed, to be honest. And so I am finding that more and more clients are doing this. They're having staff members come in and perform a day's work of admin work or whatever it might be so that they can start ramping up their operation so that they're ready to go once dental office is open again.
So I have, so in your example, you talked about someone making $600 or the $500. What if they were making significantly more pre-COVID and you have reduced them down, or you furloughed them or laid them off, and now you just bring them in for 10 hours? So let's take an easy example. Someone who makes $25 an hour, you want to bring them in for 10 hours a week. Does that doesn't affect their CERB at all? That's fine if you
pay them $250 or less.
Okay.
But with that employee, like let's say a hygienist who was earning $50 a week pre-COVID, you could certainly call that person back onto payroll and maximize out at the $847. And then still get them to come in and do some work from time to time. That's fine, right? There's no restriction on anything like that.
Okay. That's
okay. So what I'm finding is the majority of employers are interested in assisting their employees the best they can with minimal to no prejudice to the employer. And that's the balance we're trying to strike with our clients.
Yeah, I can see a lot of my colleagues bring back someone one day a week to do some. Plus, I think a lot of them want to come back. I mean, like all of us, we're going stir crazy now.
No, that's right. That's right. Most people would welcome an honest day's work at this point. So, so we're finding that most employers are getting onto the programs, but they want to work out all of these issues beforehand before they jump into them. And so really that's what we've been spending the bulk of our time with our clients, is making sure that we look at their numbers, their individual numbers for each staff member, figuring out what works best for each individual staff member, and then moving through that to get them onto the program. So it takes a little bit of time. And as I said at the outset, these programs probably could be more straightforward than they are. But that's what we're here for, is to assist people to get through them and to make sure that they're saving as much money as they can, and that they're protecting themselves as best as possible.
Makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. So, I mean, my conclusion from this is there are more options open to dentists right now than they thought. I mean, you have to. Unfortunately, you're going to be playing with numbers, and if you have the larger the practices, the more intricate it's going to get. But if you run you're a single dentist practice, and you have a smaller staff, those options become a little more palatable for you, and definitely. I mean, especially if you had long-standing staff, I think that makes more sense to be involved into that situation as opposed to just saying, go get your CERB, because I think goodwill is worth it.
And keep in mind that the reason, ultimately, that we want to do this, aside from being fair and good to your staff members, is that you want to get them called off of layoff, so that layoff period doesn't keep running, and that we start butting up against the 13 weeks, which will be deemed an automatic termination of employment. So going back to that, there are creative ways that you can work with these systems, these programs, to make sure that your staff are getting paid and that you're protecting yourself. But you need to keep your eye on the prize on that 13 weeks. And, I've been saying from the outset that maybe the government might step in, the provincial government at some point, and extend the layoff period, as they've done in Manitoba, for instance. But I haven't heard anything about that yet in Ontario. So it makes logical sense that they would do so, but they haven't.
I have a question. So if you're hiring them back for 10 hours, is that considered off of layoff at that point?
It depends. So if you had laid someone off and then you get them to come back to do work, and they're doing 50% less work than they normally would have done, it still constitutes a layoff. But without making this too complicated, there are ways that you can deal with that as well with your staff members, so that even though you're helping them out by giving them the $250 and allowing them to maintain CERB, in exchange for that, you might ask them to agree to extend the layoff period beyond 13 weeks.
Yeah, and we're in week 7.
That's sort of the tit for tat that some employers are interested in, is I will help you out. I'll get you the $250 so that you have $750 per week. But if I do so and it still constitutes a layoff, we need to agree that the layoff period can be extended.
Yeah, that's important to know.
So again, these are not straightforward issues, right? There's lots to consider in terms of these programs.
Yeah, at least they have programs. It's just navigating through them. So
yeah, that's right. And just one more point on CEWS before we move on to the next topic. As I said about the 25%, there continues to be some noise in the dental industry that dentists have to pay the 25%, that you can't only pay the 75% under CEWS. I say absolutely you can. You can avoid paying that 25%. And the way that I've been asking my clients to conceptualize this is that these programs are open for businesses that are still doing business, okay? The programs themselves contemplate that in the month of March, you were doing 85% of your normal revenues. And then in April and May, you were doing 70% of your normal revenues. When you have a big fat goose egg, like most dentists, unfortunately, I cannot imagine how you would fall into that category of employers who's expected to pay the 25%. I just don't see it.
I agree with you on that. Mine's not a legal opinion. I just think that makes common sense. Well, that's great advice. So let's transition a little bit. We've talked a little bit about this, but CERB, or the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. The one thing I read it yesterday, that if you were in the people who apply firstly, you have to reapply. Correct? Is that right?
Yes.
So you have to apply. Do they have to apply every month, or is it the periods just like the CEWS?
I believe it's every month, but we're dealing less and less with the CERB on my side because we do more employer work, right? So we're really just helping employers more so with the CEWS and the interplay with CERB. But I do believe it's either every 2 weeks or every month that you do need to reapply. Yes.
That's important. So I don't have anything else to talk about the CRB.
And I thank you for that because it's like Groundhog Day with the CEWS and CERB for me
every day.
every single day. Yeah.
Well, doesn't it seem like we've been in a Groundhog Day for the last 7 weeks? It's like you get up. In my case, I change one pair of sweatpants for another pair of sweatpants, and that's how it goes. Let's talk about associates. So earlier this month, I spoke to some people in some interviews, and it's been largely talked online. If the overheads of dental practices go up due to PPE requirements or outfitting our offices with different technology, and our compensation rate for associates has been largely at 40%. One, have you had a lot of clients asking about that? And two, I assume it has to do a lot to do with contracts between employer and principal and associate. But let's start with the first. Have you had a lot of clients reach out to you and ask you about that process at all?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And what I'm finding is the deeper we get into this, these types of questions are coming up more and more. So at the outset, I think everyone was maybe a little more optimistic than they are today about returning to dentistry and what that was going to look like. And as other provinces open up, I think we're starting to get some insight into what dentistry in Ontario is going to look like over the next little while. And so it may not be that you're returning anytime soon to what you were doing in January or February of this year. And so as dentists start to realize this and this reality starts to set in for them, they are starting to look at, okay, well, where are my expenses going to be when I open up? And what can I do to try and minimize those? And yes, this question about associate dentists is popping up more and more. And as we know, for the most part, the going rate for an associate in dental practice is to pay them 40% of collections less lab fees.
Yeah.
That's what it is, okay? That's 97% of associate contracts that I see
Canada
have that exact same metric for paying.
Yeah.
Okay, sometimes you see might be a little bit more, sometimes you see it might be a little bit less, but otherwise that's the classic tried and true way to compensate an associate.
Yeah, those are conversations where some of them that are going to have to happen. It's unfortunate.
They are, and in terms of reducing associate compensation, it can be done. So if you were to look at doing that, first and foremost, you would look to whether or not there's a written contract.
Yep.
And just like in any good written contract, even though associates are retained as independent contractors, there nevertheless should be a termination provision in that agreement.
Yeah.
And what you typically see in dentistry is a 60-day or a 90-day termination provision. Again, sometimes you see 30 days, sometimes you see 120, but it will fall somewhere in between all those 30 to 120, with the bulk being 60 or 90. If you wanted to go down that road, the quick and easy way to do it would be to terminate the associate agreement by giving the notice under the agreement and then proposing to the associate that you'll retain them on a new contract with a lesser rate. That would be the easy way to do it. And then the risk, of course, would be that you decide to pay at 35%, but the dentist across the street is still saying they'll pay at 40%. So unless it's done sort of industry-wide or en masse amongst dentists, you might want to be careful about doing that. But if you're dead set on changing that compensation model, then there are ways that it can be done. If you don't have a contract in place that contains a termination provision with your staff member, with the associate dentist, it gets a little bit more difficult. Again, for the most part, associates are retained as independent contractors. And for the most part, they're true independent contractors, not name only. But what some dentists and associate could argue is that they're a dependent contractor. Okay, and that is a definition that exists at law, the courts will deem someone to be a dependent contractor. And if you terminate a dependent contractor's contract without there being a written contract in place that determines how much notice you need to provide, oftentimes they can be treated like an employee for termination purposes. Mm-hmm. And so let's say that you were to unilaterally come back to dentistry and say to your associate, well, when times were good, I could pay you 40%, but right now I'm looking at it and all I can do is 30%. You would run the risk, just like with an employee, of an argument that contract has been constructively terminated. And if you don't have your affairs organized properly so that you have the termination provisions reduced to writing, you could be exposing yourself to significant problems. So I would advise anyone who is contemplating that to look before you leave.
It's just stuff that's been talked about. I don't think it's important to know all the facts before you make that kind of decision.
It is. And then practically speaking, not that I have been going over this with many clients yet, because they just want to understand, can it be done before they start talking about how it can be done. But in normal times, even, it wasn't uncommon to have a staggered approach to compensating your associate. Yeah. So for instance, if their billings hit, for their billings up to a certain number, they were paid at 37.5%.
Yeah.
And then if their billings increased over that number, it went to 40%. And then if they were really going for it and having a fantastic month or a fantastic quarter, you pay them at 42.5% for those billings over a certain number. And maybe what we'll see is more and more of something like that, where you tell the associate, I'm going to work with you, but it has to be based on your actual billings and collections. And if you can meet certain quotas, then I'll ensure that you're compensated appropriately. But if you're not meeting those quotas, then I can't do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was on a that was many years ago. I've been in a practice home for almost 16 years, but go back that time, I was on a staggered contract then, where it was in my best interest to bill more.
That's right.
And it was a win-win for everybody. So the more I produced, the more that they were willing to compensate me. So
that's right, and that makes sense. That's fair. Yeah. But again, even if you're going to look at changing the compensation model to something like that, you still need to be careful from a legal perspective that you get proper advice to ensure that it can be done, and you don't run the risk of an associate making a claim that you constructively terminated the associate contract.
Yeah, imagine if you have to pay them percentage of how much they've been making if they say they've been with you for a long period of time, that can add up.
It could be a lot of money. It could very well be a lot of money. That's right. So be careful. But what I'm hopeful we'll start to find is that associates, just like I'm finding with most staff members, are going to be pretty reasonable about this.
Yeah, I think
they're not going to cling to the old ways for dear life to say, even though you're struggling and you have more overhead and it costs a lot more for you to run a clinic, I'm dead set on you paying me this 40% for the rest of the time. And certainly when we're looking at changing compensation models, whether it be for associates or staff, you don't need to etch this in stone for the rest of time. Right? You could say to them, let's look at the first 3 months after we return and reevaluate and see where we are in 3 months, and similarly in 6 months. And you can change on the fly. And if you get back to something that's normal in the future, certainly there would be nothing wrong with you changing the compensation model to something that's more beneficial for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's got to be, if it's a win-win, it comes down to it. I think that's the best solution for everyone. It's going to be, we don't know what the future holds. I mean, we've never been through this. I mean, I don't know any dentists that practiced during the Spanish flu in 1918 and 1919. So I don't think any of us know what dentistry is going to be like when we get through this. I just hope we get back sooner than later, because I think a lot of us are missing doing what we normally do. Anyways, I want to thank you again for your time. I may call you again when we find out more about the program with landlords, which I think is going to be even more of a Groundhog Day headache for us, because that program seems even more convoluted than the ones that have already come before us. Any last thoughts at all?
Not really. Just again, to all the dentists out there watching, hang in there. And if you want to start making changes in your workplace and trying to figure out these programs and figuring out a way forward, certainly you should explore those, and you should get proper advice in the event that you want to move forward on any type of program or any type of cost-cutting measure.
Yeah, I agree. As I said in other videos, work on your practice while you're not in it, but make sure you get proper advice, because it's a lot easier to figure out beforehand than once you've already done it. There's no going back.
Right.
Anyways,
Right.
thank you very much again, and be safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
You too. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.